Hello guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. So, today we are gonna see, what if Quirk-less Izuku becomes a space marine secretly and got harem with Melissa and Momo, part 1. So before we start, go check out the author of this fanfic asiandollarboy, link is in the description, also subscribe to our channel and like this video, so let's begin the video. I knew that I was different from the others at a very young age. It was a hard truth embedded into me by the other neighborhood kids. The Quirk-less wonder, they called me. It was true, in a sense. I was scrawny and weak, so obviously I wasn't born with a powerful mutant-type quirk. I couldn't manifest flames or summon lightning, so we could cross out emitter type 2. Wasn't a transformation-type quirk either, as far as I could tell, although I had tried countless times. Really, my quirk seemed to be the fact that I had no quirk. In this world of superheroes and supervillains, that was a rarity. Enough to set me apart from the others. And, well, you know how kids are. I remember acutely how Katsuki Bakugo used to take advantage of my weakened status to push me around. I never blamed him for it. I still don't. Because beyond my hope to be a hero, I understood one thing very clearly. The weak have no say in anything. So I took the abuse and the scorn with my best watery imitation of the All Might smile and always patted my dirty, muddy self off before coming home so my mother wouldn't worry. Ah, my mother. She was a sweet woman and I loved her to bits. She tried her best to cheer me up, but I suspect she knew what was really going on. She never said anything, but sometimes I caught her quickly dabbing at her eyes when she thought I wasn't looking. I hated seeing her cry, so I always gave her the biggest smile I could and a huge hug, telling her about my day and how much fun I had playing hero with the other kids. We both knew it was a lie, but she played along. My father as well. Anyhow, I was different from the others. Then my 5th birthday came up. It was kind of a traumatic memory, so to say. I had invited all the kids in my class to my birthday party. When the time came, no one showed up. I sat there at an empty table, dumb paper hat on my head, waiting for the doorbell to ring. 1 hour, 2 hours. My mother called all the other parents, but they were either busy or just didn't pick up. I had never seen her so frustrated she was about to cry. I wanted to console her, seeing that no one should ever cry on my behalf, especially someone as kind and loving as my mother. I wanted to give her a big smile, tell her it was okay. But there was a weight in my chest, like my heart was being gripped by a large fist. There was pressure behind my eyes and a twinge of acid in my nose. I couldn't breathe. Why, just why? There was an acute pain in my chest, slowly getting worse. I gripped my chest, fingers clawing into my shirt, but it wouldn't alleviate. Mom, I croaked, looking up at her. She made eye contact and seemed to immediately sense something was up. Izuku, I didn't hear the rest. The pounding in my chest seemed to extend upwards into my head, like someone had taken a battering ram inside my body. Before long, I blacked out from the pain. Green. When I came to, I was lying on a bed, staring at a white ceiling. Besides me, men and women in white lab coats and stethoscopes around their neck were busy talking in hushed, excited whispers. I strained my ears, but could only pick out a few words. Second heart hormone activity not seen in any no quirk. Further tests. My mother was quick to notice my awakening, having stayed by my side the entire week. That's right, I was out for a week, during which time my body somehow managed to grow an entire new heart. There was a tiny, wrapped box on the table next to me. Your friend Katsuki came over to visit you. Mom had said he felt guilty for not coming to your party. Somehow I didn't believe that. Most likely Auntie Mitsuki found out and threw a fit at Kaken. But regardless, I grabbed the gift and unwrapped it gently. There was a card attached to the ribbon that held the wrapping paper together. Dear Deku. Here's your shitty gift. I only grabbed it cause I thought only someone pathetic like you might still be playing with dolls. You're probably crying cause no one bothered to come to your dumb party. Anyway, if you die then I'll have to come back to get this. Which will be a huge bother cause I already have one. Got it. Signed. Fucking me. Within the wrapped gift paper was an All Might figurine from his Silver Age. This was a rare collector's item. It wasn't in mint condition, though. I could tell the cardboard box had been opened before. And All Might himself had tiny minuscule scratches on his yellow boots. It was almost like someone had put a toy they played with often back into a box and tried to pass it off as it was a new purchase. My mom gently grabbed my attention away from the figurine. Izuku dear, the sensei has said you're all good to go, so put All Might away for now, alright. She stood up from the chair she had been sitting on beside my bed and exchanged an indecipherable look with the doctors in the room. We gathered our effects and left. The next week, we came back. Just a checkup, Mom said, it's just a procedure. The week after, again to the hospital. Then the week after that. Eventually, the hospital visits became a weekly excursion. Once a week, Mom would drive me to the hospital and we would be visited by a kindly old doctor named Dr. Akato. He would run a bunch of tests on me that went right over my 5-year-old brain. The process took maybe 30 minutes and then we would leave. Before leaving, Mom would stop by the checkout counter and the receptionist lady would hand her an envelope. A few years later I would find out it was money. She had been getting money from the hospital for letting them research my body. Now, before you freak out, it wasn't like she was using this money for herself. She had been saving it all in an account set aside for when I was older. Never touched a dollar of it. Weeks become months, and before long, years. I was a child, but I began to notice the changes in my body. Firstly, my height shot up like a bamboo shoot. I was heads and shoulders above anyone else in my class, including Kaken. Wounds I got from scrapes and falls healed in seconds, and my blood was a brighter shade of red than anyone else's. Sometime around my 8th birthday, I stopped needing sleep. Well, sort of. I still need to, but I could go a long time without. From what Dr. Akato explained to me, I was shutting off parts of my brain so I could function longer. Like a botanist dolphin. At this point even the densest child would have questions. So I sought out my mother one Saturday morning, ambushing her while she shuttled around the house with a laundry basket in hand. She took one look at my petulant face, hands crossed at my hips, and sighed. By this point I was already taller than she was. "I guess it's about time you knew the truth," she said. For years I had, unknowingly, been the subject of a global study. Scientists from all over the world studied my case, the first example of a mutated human without the quirk metagene. It raised all sorts of questions about the nature of quirks and other scientific mumbo-jumbo that went over my head. Ironically, I was known to the general public as the Quirk-less wonder. Kaken would probably laugh his head off if he heard that I was a medical mystery because new organs were still popping up in my body, out of the blue. I dealt with this information like any normal person would. I immediately searched up myself on the internet. There were countless medical journals about me, and I began to read about myself. Many terms flew over my head, but I persevered. It was exciting. My dreams of being a hero were inflamed once more. For the next 6 years, I spent pretty much most of my free time learning everything I needed to know in order to keep up with medical journals about myself. At 14 years old, I met my hero, All Might. Green. I hummed a happy tune as I walked my way home from school. We had just gotten our career aspiration papers handed out today, and of course, I signed myself up for UA. One of 2 in my class, the other being Kaken. No one was surprised at our decision, of course. We were easily the 2 strongest members in our school, him with his explosion quirk and me with my power quirk. The teaching staff regarded the 2 of us as shoe-ins for UA, even though some of them were a bit worried about Kaken's personality. I walked into a tunnel, the same tunnel I've walked for the past 6 years on my way home, ducking my head down a little to avoid hitting the maximum height. 2 meters sign, a few steps past a manhole. I stopped. Something was wrong. The tiny hairs on the back of my neck tingled and everything was in sharp focus. I knew this feeling. This danger sense, I felt it many times back in Quirk training camp. I was being watched and by someone with hostile intentions. Unbeknownst to me, a dark green mud was rising out of the manhole cover behind me. Sickly yellow sclera emerged from within the sludge as the villain bared its sharp ivory teeth in sadistic glee. "Invisibility cloak size M," it mused. The moment I heard the words, I lunged to the left just in time to avoid the lunge from the villain. It looked like a mass of green mud with teeth. Lots and lots of teeth. "And who are you supposed to be?" I asked, a new villain. It bristled in anger. If mud could bristle, that is. A new villain. How rude. I am the sludge villain. My quirk, sludge, allows me to be immune to physical attacks and also hijack other people's bodies. Now, stay still. This'll only hurt for about 45 seconds and then it'll be all over. Saying this, sludge villain shot a wave of sludge at me. I glanced around quickly while my mind raced, trying to find something that could help me. Immune to physical attacks, this was bad. I was a physical attacker through and through. I need something to hold him off with until I can escape. My eyes naturally landed on the manhole cover sludge villain emerged from. It was a potential weapon, however, the problem was that it was right by sludge villain. I would only have one shot at this. I dodged the wave of sludge, unslinging my backpack in the same movement and chucked it at sludge villain's eyes. Mid-air, notebooks and pencils fell out of the bag and luckily, the corner of one such notebook managed to nail right into the yellow sclera of sludge villain, causing it to roar out in pain and anger. I sprung towards the manhole, covering the distance in less than a second and hooked a finger through one of the manhole holes, lifting up the metal circle with ease. I observed a roaring villain with a critical gaze. I noticed that when he attacked, the massive sludge on his main body seemed to lessen. This means that the sludge he controls is finite. If so, I just have to whittle it down slowly. I changed my grip on the manhole cover, holding it in one hand, like a fan, and started slapping Sludge Villain. With every strike, I gouged out a part of Sludge Villain's body, spraying sludge across the tunnel walls. It seemed to work, as Sludge Villain's mass decreased slowly. It wailed in pain and anger, lashing out at me with tendrils of slime, but those I batted away too with the manhole cover. To anyone else watching, my arm would have looked like a blur, gouging away at Sludge Villain at blinding speeds. Sludge Villain couldn't even react all the way until it was whittled down to just a puddle of mud on the ground with two pitiful yellow eyes staring up at me. "Please, I'm sorry, just let me go," it wailed. I ignored it and continued batting away at other pieces of sludge that kept trying to recombine with the main body. That was the scene All Might arrived at. I am here observing a strange scene. The giant hero glanced at the scene in abject confusion. A green-haired teenager batting away globs of mud on the ground with a manhole cover. I'd be confused too. It took a bit of teamwork, but eventually the number one hero and I managed to trap the Sludge Villain in a plastic bottle. "Good work, young man." The blonde hero grinned at me, blinding white teeth included. "You should be proud of what you did. Not many pro heroes would have dealt with that villain. What's your name?" I gulped. This was my chance to impress my idol. "Izuku Midoriya. Sir." "Well, young Midoriya. You've impressed me. I'll be sure to mention you as a critical factor in the arrest of this villain." "Thank you, sir. Remember, anyone can be a hero. If more people were to be like you, the world would be a better place. Goodbye." With that said, the giant of a man jumped off into the distance. Wait. I still had a lot of questions. Well, that was a wasted opportunity. He was right in front of me, too. I should have at least asked for an autograph. Sighing in disappointment, I picked up my bags and left the scene. "Green. Izuku. You're on the news." My mom pointed to the TV in shock. On the screen was All Might speaking in an interview. If it wasn't for that brave young man, I wouldn't have caught this villain. In fact, I arrived on the scene after he did most of the work. As a hero, I'm ashamed, but I'm also very impressed. Having said that, the American hero turned to face the camera directly. "Young Midoriya, as a reward for your brave deeds, you are invited to a VIP, all expenses paid trip to Island, chaperoned by yours truly." My jaws feel wide open. This has got to be a dream. This is the most unreal thing ever, I thought. I was in a private jet, owned by the David Shield himself, on my way to the greatest technological paradise ever created in the history of mankind. Island, said to have been the brainchild of every hero company in the world, created for the sole purpose of quirk research. Over 1,000 scientists and their families inhabit the island, each of them a leading member in their own respective field. Across me sat All Might, looking as gallant and mighty as ever. "How's the view, young Midoriya? Ever been on a plane before?" "It's amazing, sir. It's my first time flying anywhere." "How did you ever get a VIP invitation to Island, let alone 2 tickets?" He gave a good-natured chuckle. "Sometimes it pays to be the number one hero in the business. Besides, I haven't seen David myself in a long time, so it was about time for a visit anyways. I just thought a young man like you would appreciate a chance to go to Island. Take it as my way of expressing gratitude for what you did." "Oh, it was nothing, sir. Anyone would have done what I did." "Don't sell yourself short, my child. It takes a brave soul to be able to stand up to someone who's threatening your life." Thank you, sir. I must say, whoever trained you did an excellent job. They should be proud of what you've become. Which hero academy did you say you were attending?" "Yes, sir." I was confused. Did All Might think I was a student in a hero academy? "I'm planning on attending UA in the fall." All Might froze. "How old did you say you were, young Midoriya?" 14. His mouth gaped wide open. He scanned me up and down quickly, as if in disbelief. "I apologize, young man, I thought you were someone in your last year of Hero Academy from how you carried yourself before. You look well. Forgive my assumptions." All Might sheepishly rubbed the back of his head. "It's alright, I often get mistaken for being older than I am. It's not often you find a 6 feet tall teenager in Japan. It's hard to find clothing that fits your size." I joked. All Might nodded his head seriously in agreement. He said something, but stiffened. He coughed awkwardly into his hands and said, "I'm sorry to cut our conversation short, young Midoriya, but I feel I must excuse myself for the restroom. Please, enjoy the rest of your flight. We should be arriving soon." Having said that, All Might dashed off in a hurry. It might have been a trick of the light, but I could have sworn that he was steaming. I guess even top heroes have to answer the call of nature. Really humbles you, now that I think about it. "Attention passengers, we will begin our descent in about 10 minutes. We will arrive at Island at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, and the temperature outside is 26 degrees Celsius. Thank you for flying with us, and we wish you an enjoyable stay." Perfect. Green. The island was like nothing I expected, but also everything I expected. Walking past immigration, I was treated to the side of a large open plaza. Large green gardens littered the sides of the plaza, and down the middle were two large red gates. Multiple paths branched off to the sides, leading further into the city. Anywhere, as far as the eye could see, was large glass-paned skyscrapers. Signs and video advertisements littered the surface of these buildings, bringing life and color to the city. People walking down the streets were dressed in pristine lab coats, looking like the stereotypical scientists they were. Welcome to Island. A brunette in a white lab coat walked towards me and All Might. Her hand was up in a wave, and she wore a polite smile on her face. Upon seeing the two of us, she paused in shock. Her face contorted in surprise and glee, and she shouted, "Midoriya Izuku." Eh? Why was she calling my name? Her outburst garnered the attention of nearby scientists, who all began muttering amongst themselves excitedly, "Midoriya Izuku. That Midoriya." Someone in the crowd shouted, "It's really him." Which triggered everyone to rush over to me. What the heck is going on? Everything was a confusing jumble. People wanted to shake my hands, take pictures with me, and ask for my autograph. One bold woman even propositioned me to be her boyfriend. I was nonplussed at the attention I was receiving. This sort of reception seemed like it should be reserved for someone like All Might, who was left, ignored, to the side. He seemed to be as bewildered as I was, his mouth hanging wide. One young boy, who I had just given my autograph to, turned and saw All Might standing there awkwardly. He maneuvered himself out of the crowd and looked at the #1 hero. Seeming to struggle internally for a little bit, the boy eventually pulled out his notebook and a pen and offered them to All Might. "Here, you can sign them if you want." His eyes were full of pity and compassion. All Might, with shaky hands, reached down and gave the boy his autograph. Having done a good deed for the day, the young boy patted All Might's knee in compassion, then ran off with his 2 prizes. Eventually, the crowd became too much to handle, and so All Might and I made a mad dash out of there, stopping only when we could no longer hear the crowd behind us. "Young Midoriya, you continue to baffle my every expectation. I've got to say, ever since I became a top hero, I've never had that kind of thing happen before." That seemed like a disproportionate reception for someone like me. I agreed. Indeed, All Might affixed me with a curious stare. "Who exactly are you, Izuku Midoriya?" "Me? I'm nobody." That didn't sound suspicious at all. "Way to go, Izuku." All Might didn't look convinced, but he let it go, thankfully. I didn't know what I would have said if he decided to press further. I was nobody. Wasn't I? Boing. 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 The sound of a spring suddenly garnered our attention. I turned my head in the direction of the sound and witnessed a blonde woman riding a red pogo stick bouncing towards our direction. Blonde tresses fell over a red cardigan top and verdant eyes peeked over stylish round glasses. "Uncle Might," she called in exuberance. "Uncle Might." All Might had a nephew. "Melissa." All Might seemed equally as delighted to see her. She pounced off her pogo stick and leapt into his embrace, giggling like a child. "Long time no see, Melissa. I almost didn't recognize you." "I'm 17 now, Uncle Might. Aren't I a little bit heavier?" "Never, my dear. You're still the same darling child I used to carry in my arms." They laughed and All Might set her down gently. "Where's Dave, that old rascal?" All Might boomed. "Papa's in his lab, waiting for you. He couldn't come get you himself, so he sent me instead. It looks like he was finishing the last stage of some research he began years ago. You're just in time to see it." "I see. What was the research about?" "Confidential. He wouldn't even tell me. That damn Dave, keeping things from his daughter like that. I'll be sure to give him a talking to for you." "That's right. You tell him, Uncle." Melissa pouted in faux anger. They finally seemed to remember the presence of a third person and turned their attention to me. All Might grinning apologetically. I had been following the exchange in fascination, and seeing that their reunion seemed to be mostly over, I held out my hand in greeting to the blonde. "Hey there, I'm Midoriya Izuku. You can call me Izuku if you like." She grabbed my hands and shook it. Her hands were small and dainty, easily engulfed by my hands in comparison. "Melissa Shield, call me Melissa or Mel. It's nice to be able to put a face to the name, Izuku." "A face to the name? You've heard of me, then?" "I think there's not a single soul on this island who hasn't." All Might cut into the conversation at this point. "My dear Melissa, I am curious about that. The people on this island seemed unusually receptive to young Midoriya here. I hadn't realized that word of his deeds had spread this far this quickly." Melissa blinked in confusion. "His deeds? You mean you don't know?" "Know what?" All Might and I echoed in confusion. Melissa giggled. Figures you would bring the one person every scientist on the island wants to meet here entirely by accident, Uncle Might. Did you really not know Izuku here's moniker? His moniker? Quirk-less wonder, she smiled and glanced at me from the corner of her eyes, isn't that right? I gave a bashful smile to All Might. Green. Young Midoriya, allow me introduce you to my best friend, David SH. I know who he is. I couldn't help but burst out. All Might and the professor both seemed taken aback at my outburst. We were standing in one of the research towers located in Central Island. Professor David Shield. A top scientist in quirk research who received a Nobel Quirk Prize. All Might's partner in America. He's designed your costumes all the way from young age to golden age. I never thought I'd be able to meet him in person. It was hard to keep the fanboy out of my voice. The professor, a gentleman in his early 40s, with a head full of brown hair and a brown goatee, simply laughed in good humor. Well, it doesn't seem like I need to introduce myself. It's nice to meet you too, Izuku Midoriya. All Might watched the exchange with his patron grin, but suddenly gave 2 short coughs. He covered his mouth with his hands and muttered a quick, "Excuse me." But the action was noticed by everyone in the room. David Shield looked concerned for a moment, but he quickly schooled his features. I haven't seen All Might in a long time. Why don't you guys let us catch up a little? Melissa, how about you show Midoriya here what you've been working on lately? The blonde bubbly girl smiled, I'd be honored to. Follow me, Izuku. I gave a short bow to Professor Shield and All Might, then turned around to follow Melissa. As the mechanical doors closed behind me, I heard the professor say to his assistant, Sam, you leave us too. Take a break. Green. All Might. As soon as the door closed, I relaxed my tense body. Hacking coughs tore through my lungs as I immediately relapsed into my normal form. Dave was immediately by my side. Tashi, are you alright? I waved him off dismissively. Yeah, I'm fine. I was just approaching my limit for the day, is all. He watched me worriedly. Are you sure you'll be alright to attend the party tonight? I can tell them you couldn't make it, you don't have to push yourself. It's fine, Dave. I promised you I would make a speech, didn't I? Besides, I just need to rest a little bit and my muscle form will be good to go for tonight. I promise. Dave seemed a little unconvinced, but he let it go with a sigh. You're as headstrong as ever, Tashi. I laughed. Wouldn't be me if I wasn't. He and I both smiled fondly, reminiscing on past memories. By the way, how did you come across the Quirk-less wonder? Dave questioned. I sighed, completely by accident. I was hoping you could tell me more, actually. I've been so confused since stepping on this island. Dave gave a slight smile. Yes, I saw what happened at the entrance at Island. I turned to him incredulously. You saw that? How? He shrugged. There's not much that goes on in Island that I don't see. He turned around and spoke to thin air. Pull up the medical files on subject XR093T, please. At once, Sir. Came the mechanical reply. The room dimmed and a holographic display popped up in the middle of the room. Dave approached it and read off the file. We first discovered his case about a decade ago. The boy suddenly passed out, freaking out his mother. She sent him to the hospital to get a checkup, which was how we discovered the existence of a second heart in his chest cavity. I remained silent and merely listened. A second heart was unusual, but there were stranger quirks out there. Dave continued, over the next few weeks the doctors monitored him, only to discover something strange. The quirk metagene was inactive within the boy, meaning that his second heart was not a result of a quirk, but something else. Obviously, this raised questions about the nature of quirks. We had always assumed that quirks were simply the next evolutionary step for humans, but Izuku is living proof that this isn't the case. I nodded, following along. Needless to say, we kept a close eye on him over the next few years. This is what we found. Dave pulled out a holographic file, gesturing for me to come closer. A secondary heart to pump more blood in his systems. A third lung, seen in this chart here. A second pituitary gland to increase his growth rate to superhuman levels. His ribsage has fused together into a solid mass of interlaced bone plates. His skeletal-muscular strength is at 20 times the norm compared to the average human. His blood was measured to carry more than 3 times the amount of oxygen in a normal human blood cell. Incredibly sensitive ears and eyes. We've tested him to be able to clearly see up to 5 kilometers in the dark. He has a second stomach that neutralizes poison. A second kidney, too. His nose and tongue have a similar fidelity to a canine's, allowing him to identify extremely subtle odors and track someone by smell alone. Small glands located in his mouth produce acid. We've also identified a second epidermis layer underneath his skin, which darkens upon UV stimuli. His sinews are naturally reinforced with an unknown organic metal that provide an additional source of defense for the body and give him further enhanced strength. To top it off, his natural recoverability is off the charts. I was beginning to grow dizzy with the amount of information thrown at me. Dave looked at me with a side eye, looking extremely serious. In conclusion, superhuman durability, strength, senses, and regeneration. He is highly resistant to all forms of poison, as well as radiation. He has 2 hearts to pump blood through his systems at a higher rate. The kicker. Still no sign of the quirk metagene. My mouth gaped open, that's impossible. Dave shook his head, it's true. There are still plenty of other organs and functions we haven't been able to determine yet. He looked at the holographic file floating in front of him. It's almost as if nature intended for him to become a weapon. Where are we going? My research lab. I couldn't help but steal glances at my charge as we walked. Right now, we were walking through the familiar halls of I Academy, the place at which I was currently a student of. Izuku was glancing around in excitement, his unabashed enthusiasm infectious. His spiky green hair framed his forehead in a mopey, disordered look, and below that, twinkling cheerful pools of green were currently darting around the hallways, taking in the sights with interest. His gait was languid but confident, and I couldn't help but mentally compare him to a powerful predator prowling through his backyard. My gaze involuntarily traveled a bit lower, and what I saw, oh my. I averted my eyes frantically. My cheeks began to warm, and my heart rate increased slightly. Who would have thought that the Quirk-less wonder, the reason why I decided to pick up a second concentration in biology, could look so delectable. Walking here next to him made me feel extremely self-conscious. I was never one to really notice other people's apparel, but for God's sake, did his shirt have to be so tight? My eyes could easily trace the outline of his muscles through the thin fabric layer. Around me, I could feel whispers and stares, especially from my female schoolmates, like pins and needles. I could already imagine the salacious rumors circling around the academy. Somehow that didn't bother me that much. "We're here," I announced, stepping into an unmarked room. As Izuku stepped in, I surreptitiously locked the door and turned the light outside the door red. That would indicate to anyone that there was a delicate experiment going on inside the room that could not be disturbed. "Wow," Izuku breathed, eyes shining, "this looks so professional." He was like a little kid who was brought to the toy store. He darted back and forth around the room, gushing over each piece of scientific equipment and chattering a mile a minute. I giggled at his antics. "I'm glad you like it. Here, let me show you something cool." I punched in some commands on my computer, causing an entire section of the wall to turn over, revealing my past projects, supported on individual racks. There were power gloves, rocket boots, helmets, watches, and other miscellaneous support items. I have made a lot over the years. These are all experimental support items I made myself. They've not been field tested yet, but the products themselves are complete. Izuku seemed like he was vibrating in excitement. Are you alright there, Izuku? That is so cool. I can't believe how amazing you are, Mel. You must be so talented." I raised a hand to my face to hide the blush that lit up my face at his compliment. "It's no big deal." I finished with a small bashful voice, hand involuntarily tucking a strand of hair behind my ears. My cheeks were definitely warm now. I hope he doesn't notice. "What's happening to you, Melissa?" "So what do they do?" This one provides addition boosts to the power of." I spent most of the afternoon explaining my products to him. If I had to stand really close to him to do it, then that was because I wanted to better explain my products. If our arms and elbows occasionally touched due to our proximity, then that was because I was reaching over to demonstrate a particular effect. Really, it was just for convenience sake. "Oh, dear. I'm in trouble. I think I like this boy. Green. Izuku." I was having so much fun talking to Melissa that I completely lost track of the time. When I glanced up at the digital clock whilst in the middle of an animated conversation with her, I saw that the clock read 7:12 p.m. I froze. Had I really spent an entire afternoon with this girl already? "What's wrong?" she asked. "Nothing," I gulped, "but wasn't there a party or something we were supposed to attend tonight?" "Yeah, but don't worry. We still have a lot of time." To her words cut off abruptly as she glanced at the clock. "It started 10 minutes ago. We're already late." "What? Oh dear, oh my gosh, I have to get dressed immediately and do my makeup and my hair. What should I do?" Melissa started to panic, but my house is on the other side of town and it'll take too long to go there and get back to I Tower. "Melissa, calm down. Dad's going to kill me. This is his big night to announce the secret project he's been working on." "Melissa. I was supposed to be there. I can't believe how stupid." I sighed. This wasn't going to work. She was in full panic mode right now. There's only one option left. I reached out and gently grabbed a hold of Melissa by the shoulders, stopping her from her panicked pacing. It didn't take much to stop her, and she looked at me with a frantic, lost gaze. I moved up my hands upwards to cup her face gently, giving her my most calming smile. Wah. She seemed to have turned to stone, her body rigid, her wide eyes locked into mine. This is what mom used to do to get me to calm down. Grab by the shoulders, lock our gazes, and lean in. Melissa, I breathed, calmed down, and thought. She stared at me wide-eyed. Her mouth opened and closed like a goldfish before she managed to croak out, "Too close." I gave her a searching look before retreating. Melissa pulled away from me quickly, bringing one hand up from where it had previously been resting at her sides to hold her elbow. Her face was pink and flush, and her gaze wandered around the room without making contact with mine. What are our options? I asked her patiently, you know this place the best. She took a few seconds to gather herself and said contemplatively, well, I do have a 3D printing machine right here in the lab. I could probably print out an outfit for me right here. And for you too, since you're here. Are you sure? I mean. She waved off my concerns. It'll be alright. As long as no one finds out. She winked at me. Okay. Well, how long does this take? She considered it a little bit. A minute or two, maybe. I choked a little bit, fast. This is the technological paradise of the modern world we're talking about. Oh, right. Island. Forgive my plebeian mincet, then. Melissa rushed over to her computer and said, well, let me get the process started then. It should be done in about 3 minutes. I watched the entire process in silent amazement. I couldn't help but be impressed with the blonde girl beside me. She only seemed a year or two older than I am, but could already do something like this. Meanwhile, all I could do was punch things really hard. There, it's done. She turned around with the 2 finished products after a few minutes of waiting. This should fit you. In her hands were 2 pieces of clothing. On her left, a suit with a mossy green jacket and pants, coupled with a white undershirt and a black tie. On her right, a similarly colored full-length dress with a slit up the side of the thighs and an open back. I recognized it as a wrap dress. Matching colors? I queried, raising one eyebrow. She threw me a provocative smirk. Why, afraid to be seen in public with me? I had no response to that beyond a minute shrug. I grabbed the offered apparel from her and nothing. We just kind of stood there, staring at each other, as a major problem about the situation began to dawn on us. Where the hell do we change? I awkwardly coughed, where? I didn't even know how to phrase the question. There obviously was no place to change here. Is the nearest restroom? So I could change there? Melissa made to answer reflexively, but seemed to bite down at her words at the last second. It's HRMPH, actually, because this is the R&D area, the closest bathroom is really far away. Besides, we're already late and it'll take too much time to walk there. So her voice got smaller at this point, we're going to have to change in here. I stared at her in slight suspicion. Really, there were no bathrooms anywhere in the floor? I don't buy it. Melissa wouldn't meet my gaze, which only strengthened my skepticism. Hurry up, Izuku. Don't want to be later than we already are. I'm a guy, you know, I wanted to say. Normally, this was a situation I would be jumping for joy in. A beautiful girl like Melissa asking me to change with her? I'd be insane to say no. However, this was David Shield's daughter. I couldn't possibly profane a Somian like her. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like I'll have a choice in the matter. Melissa had already started to take off her pants, it seemed. I hurriedly turned around to avoid seeing anything I shouldn't. After a brief moment of hesitation, I gathered up my courage and started to take my shirt off. Be quick and efficient, I chanted in my head, quick and efficient. Don't think about what's going on behind you. I quickly stripped down to my undergarments and began to put the clothes Melissa printed out on. This fits perfectly. She must have a really good eye for measurements. That'd be really useful in a support hero. At some point the shuffling behind me stopped. I took that as evidence that Melissa was done changing too, so I turned around. Bad idea. Or a great idea, depending on how you look at it. This is a backless dress, of course I have to be topless to wear it. She gave me a half-lidded smile, and why aren't you turning your eyes away, mister? Why aren't you covering up? I shot back. I don't have anything embarrassing to hide. Why should he cover up? I couldn't say anything in return. There was something twisted about her logic, but for the life of me I couldn't think with my brain so sluggish right now, so I kept my mouth shut. And my eyes wide open, of course. Opportunities like this come once in a lifetime, and I'd be damned if I didn't burn this sight into my mind. Melissa gave me an erotic smirk and, whilst maintaining eye contact, bent down and stepped into the dress. She pulled up the dress up to her waist and stopped there, leaving her top still bare. Why don't you come over here and help me? She asked, I need someone to tie up the back. Having said that, she turned around and lifted up her hair, waiting. As I walked closer, I could smell excitement and arousal wafting off her. Curse my sensitive nose, sometimes. I approached nervously, stopping once I was directly behind her. I took a breath to steady my nerves. What should I do? I questioned in a low voice. My breath must have tickled her ears because I could see goosebumps and tingles immediately appeared on the back of her neck. Melissa hummed and tilted her head backwards a little bit so she could stare me in the eyes. She smiled at me, eyes glittering mysteriously, but said nothing. Her body posture remained open and relaxed, indicating I should figure it out for myself. I took a deep breath, held it, and let it go. Fine, you want to play like this, you got it. I reached down to the sides of her dress, pulling up 2 pieces of fabric extending from the sides. These were probably meant to cover her assets. I paused here, uncertain. There were no strings I could see to tie the 2 strips of fabric together. Thus pressed the ends together, her amused voice rang out, it'll weld. Yes, well they did. Huh, that's technology for you, I guess. Melissa turned around and purred, thank you Izu. Her pet name for me made my spine tingle warmly. Both my hearts pumped loudly in my chest. Now, let's get going. Wait. I stopped her. Don't you need your glasses? I was referring to the pair of round glasses she left on a desk while changing. Oh, I have perfect vision, don't worry. Those glasses are good. Perhaps you'll find out in the future. She gave me a coquettish wink and pressed a button on the wall. The doors to the lab clicked and slid open with a hiss. She walked outside, swaying her hips a little bit before turning to look over her shoulder, you following? Wow, she knew exactly what she was doing. Speechlessly, I followed her out. When did she lock the doors? Green. All might. I grunted as my bound form hit the ground. How did things end up like this? I was careless. Who could have imagined a villain attack an island of all places, the once place with security measures comparable to Tartarus itself? No one. But I still should have had my guard up. And now they've taken Dave. About 15 minutes ago, villains suddenly burst into the ballroom where Dave was hosting his party. All attending members of the party were caught off guard, including me, and I couldn't take action once they revealed that they've the entire island under hostage. Which led to my current predicament, bound and immobile due to the restraining strips installed in the ground, helplessly watching as the villains brought Dave and his assistant Sam somewhere up the tower. I glared at the red-haired man, who seemed to be the leader. You'll pay for this. I growled. All I got in response was a sneer, number 1 hero, eh? You're not so tough now. Soon, the name Wolfram will spread through the world as the villain who brought down All Might. As soon as I get what I want. And what's your purpose? I questioned, latching on to whatever hints he gave. Why do all of this? What do you gain? Wolfram merely snorted, if you think I'd just blabber my entire plan to you here, you're mistaken. I'm not the type to make that kind of low-level mistake. He walked away smugly, gesturing to his men. Keep this man under watch, I don't care that he's bound. He's still the number 1 hero. If he moves, shoot someone here. He may be invulnerable to guns, but the people here aren't. I grit my teeth in frustration. How despicable, I thought, holding the people here hostage to prevent me from taking action. Not for the first time, I cursed myself for my uselessness. Melissa, young Midoriya, please be safe. Green. Izuku. Something's wrong. I said, grabbing Melissa by the wrist. She glanced at me in surprise, having just been about to open the ballroom doors. What is it? It's too quiet. Have you seen anyone on our way here? Now that you mention it, it is strange that the receptionist isn't there. Or the patrolling guards, either. She conceded, but shrugged her shoulders. I'm sure it's nothing. They might be on a water break or something. She moved to open the door. I let go of her hand, thinking that I might be being too paranoid. She knows this place a lot better than I do. If she says nothing's wrong, nothing's probably wrong. However, the instant the door opened a fraction, I caught a whiff of something that instantly made my blood chill. The waft of blood, fear, and anxiety entered my nose, and the hairs on my neck began to tingle. Melissa, I said sharply, wait. She flinched at my harsh tone. Something's definitely wrong. I smell blood. I was warned. Melissa looked worried now. Her hand paused uncertainty, leaving the door ajar by fraction. She made to speak, but I cut her off with a hand gesture, I mimed. We listened at the door. Hey, is that door supposed to be open like that? No, I don't think so. Nobu, go check it out. Gee, why can't you make Daigo do it? He's closer. Don't make me repeat myself. Do it. Shit, I thought, they're coming over. Melissa seemed to have realized her mistake, judging by her pale face. She looked at me frantically for instructions. I held out an open palm, signaling for her to wait. Okay, at least 3 villains inside, possibly more. Possible injured civilians. One is heading over right now to investigate. I could probably take him out quickly with a well-placed punch. The footsteps from inside drew closer. My sensitive ears could pick them out easily, despite the thick carpet covering the floor. From my position crouched behind the frame of the door, I could barely peek into the gap left in Melissa's gap. I made eye contact with the pale-faced girl. When I said go, let go, I mouthed. She nodded. Seconds ticked by like hours, until finally, I saw a webbed hand grab the door handle from the other side. Go. Melissa let go of the handle she had been holding, and leapt back. The villain, unaware of the girl behind the door, pushed it open, gunpoint held cautiously outwards. Too bad it wouldn't help him. With a blindingly fast punch, I struck the villain with my fist, striking him in the throat, crushing it instantly. I grimaced a bit, didn't mean to do that, but caught the body before it slumped, holding it upright. The gun. I forgot about the gun. Seeing that the weapon was about to slip from the villain's webbed hands and clatter onto the ground noisily, Melissa managed to catch it just in time. We both held our breaths. Don't notice anything, don't notice anything. Hey Nobu, what's taking so long? Get back here if it's nothing. I don't feel safe watching All Might with anything less than 3 people. All Might? He was in there? He must be confined in some way. There's a confirmed amount of villains in there now. They're probably all armed with guns like this one, and there's no telling what kind of quirk they possess. Nobu? Why aren't you answering? I suppose there's no time to think. We just got to take out the other 2 before they can react. Melissa, provide cover fire. I whispered, I'm going in. Alright. She shakily nodded, I got you. I gave her my most reassuring smile, don't worry, All Might's catchphrase ringing in my mind, I am here. Melissa said nothing, but her trembling lips formed into a determined line. I'll protect your back, she promised, do what you have to. Nodding at her, I took a deep breath. Here we go. I burst into the room, using the body of Nobu as cover. I took a moment to take in everything. Scientists in lab coats and some well-dressed civilians were huddled in a corner, while 2 men in black military fatigues stood guard over a prone form. One man was tall and had a round head that appeared to merge into his thick neck with little distinction. The other had shoulder-length hair of a desaturated pink color that flared outwards to the sides and a curved tattoo beneath his eyes that went down his cheeks. With shorter bangs between and to the sides of his ass, he recognized All Might on the ground instantly. He seemed to be bound in some sort of glowing electrical tape. But the man with the round head flinched. Who are you? I didn't reply and instead started to charge them. Don't give them time to think. Holy shy, he's fast. Daigo, don't just stand there, shoot him. Young Midoriya. All Might cried out in shock. Seeing the gun nozzles pointed towards me, I placed Nobu's body in front of me, like a fleshy shield. Bullets peppered into his back with tiny meaty smacks. Well, if he wasn't dead before, he was now. Daigo and the other villain continued to fire at Nobu until the corpse dropped onto the ground. Where'd he go? Right here, I announced from the air, right before I drop-kicked Daigo in the face with soles of my feet. His nose made a cracking sound as I kicked him, sending him flying across the room and slamming into the wall. Cracks formed in the wall behind him from the force of his impact. I had thrown Nobu's body forward as I dashed and jumped upwards. That little bit of misdirection allowed me to escape the villain's line of sight for a second, which allowed me to jump up and get the drop on Daigo. You little shit. Roared the remaining villain, dropping his gun as his hands morphed into a cone-shaped sword. You'll rue the day you decided to cross sword kill. He slashed at me with his swords, which I barely dodged. This guy was angry, but trained. Every slash was aimed at vital points on my body, which would cripple or kill me if I was a normal person. Unluckily for him, I wasn't. I followed the blade swings with my eyes, and when he overextended on one lunge, I grabbed his sword hands with my palms, stopping them in their tracks. The edges of the blade dug into my palms, severing flesh all the way to bone. The pain was immense, but nothing I couldn't handle. Seeing my actions, Swordkill sneered maliciously, looks like you don't want your hands anymore. He withdrew his blades from my grasp, but found that he couldn't move them. How strong are you? I glared at him as I began to squeeze the blades. The edges dug into my hand, but my bone was a lot tougher than whatever his swords are made of. Cracks began to form on the surface of Swordkill's blades, and he screamed in agony as he was slowly forced to his knees. My hands. He screamed, you're crushing my hands. How is this possible? My swords are formed from a titanium alloy. I ignored his screams and continued to apply pressure. Suddenly, I heard a growl behind me, causing me to glance back in worry. Daigo had apparently shaken off my kick and had transformed into a hulking purple beast. He roared in fury and blitzed towards me with reckless abandon. I cursed to myself, crap, I won't be able to dodge this. He's too close. As I prepared myself to be hit with stone-crushing force, a sudden bang, 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 rang through the air. The hulking purple beast ran a few more steps before slowing down, slumping forward, and reverting into a human form. A red hole sprouted in the middle of his forehead, from which rivers of blood were beginning to flow. At the doorway stood Melissa, gun nozzle smoking. She lowered the weapon and gave me a wan smile, "Told you I got your back." I returned the smile and turned my attention back to Swordkill. His swords had been distorted beyond recognition in my grasp, and he had been reduced to a whimpering, sobbing mess. I finished him off with a knee to the face, knocking him unconscious. Seeing this, Melissa ran over to me, looking at my hands in worry. "My God, Izu. Are you alright? That was so reckless. What if you lost your hands?" Seeing her fretting over my well-being gave me a warm feeling in my chest, and I let her hand over me a bit more before gently disengaging myself from her grasp. "Don't worry, Mel. See? It's already healing." I held up bloody palms out for her to see, and sure enough, my wounds were already steaming and closing up. The recovery was fast enough to be seen by the naked eye. Soon, my hands were good as new, despite the horrendous condition they were in a few seconds ago. Melissa looks at them in wonder. "I had heard the rumors," she breathed, "but I didn't believe them until now. A naturally super regenerative body without a quirk metagene. That's unheard of." A dry cough from behind us interrupted her musings. "I'm glad you two are getting along, but can we do something about this binding, please?" All Might stared at the two of us with a deadpan gaze. I could only scratch my head sheepishly. "Green." It took a while, but with the help of the other civilians in the room, we managed to tie up Swordkill's unconscious body. You've got to hand it to scientists. They managed to tie Swordkill up in a way that even if he woke up, he wouldn't have enough leverage to cut himself out of the makeshift ropes we created from tablecloths and jackets. I doubted he would have been able to cut anything with the state I left his blades in, but it was pretty cool to see them do it. I made a note to remember the process so I could replicate it in the future. While they were doing this, Melissa and I were trying to find a way to free All Might from his bonds. However, we were unable to do anything. "These restraints were made to restrain quirk users," Melissa explained. "The only way we can deactivate them is from the control room." "Where is that?" I asked worriedly. She gave me a grim look. "The top of this tower. The control room has probably been taken over by the villains already." "Is there no other way?" All Might asked in frustration. "You said these were built with quirk users in mind," I said. "How do they work?" "Well, they suppress the quirk numbers in your body. The science would take too long to explain, but essentially they make you unable to use your quirk." I began to feel a bubble of hope rise in my chest. "Which means that they can be broken with pure brute strength if I don't use a quirk." Melissa's eyes widened. "Of course." She exclaimed, "Your body doesn't have a quirk, but it's still ultra strong. Here," she moved aside, "give it a try." I quickly moved up to All Might's prone body. "I'm sorry sir," I apologized, "this might be a little rough." "It's alright, young Midoriya," came his reply, "do what you need to." I grasped the restraints tightly and pulled. It stretched apart like a rubber band, but refused to open. I groaned and pulled with all my strength. "No deal." "I'm sorry," I gasped, "I'm not strong enough." Beside me, Melissa bit her lips in consternation. "Even with Izu, it's not enough." All Might looked frustrated. "We don't have time for this. They could be anywhere by now." "They?" I questioned. "Who are you talking about?" All Might flinched and looked away in sadness. "I'm sorry, Melissa," he whispered, "I couldn't save him." Beside me, the blonde girl gasped as she began to notice the absence of a figure. "Uncle Might, where's Papa? Shouldn't he be here with you?" All Might couldn't meet her gaze. I felt a sinking feeling in my stomach. It couldn't possibly be Professor Shield. They took Professor Shield. "Uncle Might, where is he? Where is my papa?" Her voice was steadily increasing in panic. "They took him," All Might gritted out, tears forming at the edges of his eyes. "They took him, and all I could do was watch." Anger and despair leaked out from his voice. Melissa collapsed onto her knees beside me. "No," she whispered, "it can't be." They were both breaking down. I needed to take control of the situation, fast. "All Might," I uttered, drawing his attention, "how long ago did this happen?" "About 3 minutes before you arrived," he answered. "The villain leader, Wolfram, led Dave and his assistant Sam away. They left through the elevator and went up." "Up?" I questioned, turning to Melissa. "What's up there?" She blinked vacant eyes at me. Lots of things. This is the central tower of Island." "What's most valuable?" I pressed. "What's worth attacking Island for?" She scrunched her face in thought, trying to think. The control room also hides the vault that contains all the most classified research projects. That might be where they're headed." I nodded. "Okay, the vault. Let's try it." I stood up to leave. "Hey, wait," All Might shouted, "where do you think you're going?" I looked over my shoulder at their forms. "I'm going to save Professor Shield," I stated. It's too dangerous. All Might shook his head. You might die. I can't let you take that risk. I forbid you. I looked at All Might deep into his determined azure eyes and saw the raw concern he had for me. It was touching. This was the #1 hero who protected everyone. You've done enough, he said, saved everyone in this room already. You've performed splendidly. There's no need to risk yourself any further. I looked around the room at the pensive but uninjured civilians resting on chairs or on the ground. A few of them caught my gaze and smiled in gratitude. I did save them. It's true. But I looked back at All Might and smiled. You might know these words, but let me say them again. Go beyond. Plus ultra. He gazed back at me, stunned. The silence hung in the air for a few moments before he threw his head back and laughed. Loudly, gathering the attention of everyone in the room. Melissa gazed at me with an undecipherable emotion from the side. Yes, of course, All Might wheezed. How could I forget? My origin. He hung his head with a deprecating smile. Melissa, could you give me and young Midori a moment, please? Melissa started in surprise. She gazed at him with a profound look, then turned to me contemplatively. Eventually, she acquiesced and gave us our space, moving a dozen or so steps away. Izuku, listen to me, All Might said seriously. I nodded in concentration. This was the first time he said my name directly. Pull a strand of hair from my head, he said. What? Do it. Oh, okay. I reached out and plucked a strand of gold from atop his head. Do you trust me? He asked. With my life. Then eat that strand of hair. Right now. Discreetly. What? I stared at him with absolute perplexion. You want me to do what? I wondered if I had misheard. Eat it. All Might said. If you trust me, eat it now. Don't ask why, just do it. If you can't even trust me this much, then there's no point in going up there after Dave. Will this help rescue the professor? He didn't say anything more, just looked at me with an unidentifiable emotion. Silently. Awaiting my answer. A strand of hair lay there pinched between my fingers. Here goes nothing. I swallowed it. Looked back at All Might, who gazed into my eyes intensely, seemingly searching for something. Reflected from within his abruptly glowing blue eyes, I saw a pair of glowing green eyes staring back at me. All Might gave a smile that was all teeth. It's done. So close I thought, just a few more minutes, and I can get the hell out of here. I examined my prize, currently held within my hands. It was a delicate piece of machinery, looking like a thin metal crown, meant to wrap around the temple. Hard to believe such a tiny thing could amplify quirks. As expected of the #1 genius inventor David Shield, who was currently trailing behind me, clutching his injured shoulder. He had jumped into the way of the bullet that was meant for his traitorous assistant. A sentimental move, but ultimately foolish. The assistant still died, after all. Where are we going? You already have what you want. To meet my real employer, of course. Your real employer? Who? Ah, not so fast, I wagged my fingers. I won't be telling you anything until I'm sure we're secure. I'm not like the other second-rate villains who let down their guard at the last moment. I put a finger on my earpiece, activating it. Hey, is the ride ready? She's been ready all night, boss. Just waiting on you. Good. We'll be there in a minute. Get ready for takeoff. What about the others, sir? What about them? They were just pawns, in the end. Nothing consequential, and definitely not needed after tonight's operation. There was silence on the radio for a little bit before the other side responded. Roger that, sir. Over. I looked over my shoulder at the limping professor. He seemed to be favoring his left leg, plodding along with a limping gait. His right arm was still holding onto his left shoulder. I frowned at the sight. What's wrong with your leg? He blinked. What? I said, what's wrong with your leg? I shot you in the shoulders. Nothing really. He straightened sheepishly. Walk normally, then. Weirdo. He coughed awkwardly and started to follow me normally, albeit reluctantly. I'm warning you now, Professor, don't try anything. This is the last stretch, and if anything can go wrong, it'd be now. My alertness is on 120%. You try anything funny, the whole island goes down. Understood. The quickly muttered yes from the brown-haired scientist. Good. We eventually emerged from within the eye tower to the rooftop, upon which a helicopter was already prepped and ready for takeoff. I grabbed the doctor by the scruff of his shirt and began dragging him over to the aircraft, keeping a close eye on him the entire time. If he was going to stage an escape, now would be the opportune time. Fortunately, he seemed relatively docile and obediently got into the aircraft without much resistance. Everything was going smoothly. Yet, there was a certain sense of unease that I couldn't shake off. This op had been almost as successful. Too smooth. I had purposefully cut off radio communications with my men downstairs because I had been planning on abandoning them in the first place, but now I wondered if that had been a good idea. I had no clue what was going on downstairs. What if All Might had gotten free? Unlikely, but this was the world's best hero we're talking about. Doing the impossible is a staple for someone like him. If that's the case, then there's even less reason to dally around here. Lift off, I gave the order. I won't feel safe until I'm in the air. I patted my pockets just in case. Machine still there. The helicopter began to lift off from the landing pad slowly. I glanced at the entrance from my tower suspiciously, waiting for the other boot to drop. Nothing. The aircraft successfully launched into the air and I let go of the tenseness in my shoulder. Another job well done, I congratulated myself, closing my eyes in relief. Just in time to miss a green blur fly towards me from outside I tower. The last thing I heard before everything exploded was Delaware smash. Here comes the boot. Green. Izuku. The wind whipped past my face as I approached the escaping aircraft at incredible velocities. Power, unadulterated and wild, coursed through my body like green lightning. I felt like every single cell in my body was being supercharged, like I could cause earthquakes with my steps and produce hurricanes with my breath. Was this what All Might felt like all the time? No wonder he was the #1 hero. Stay focused, Izuku. I still had one more job to do. Save Professor Shield. Then go back and ask All Might what he meant by his power being transferable. I quickly approached the flying vehicle, homing towards it like a heat-seeking missile. The only reason I was able to do this was because I jumped from the ground outside I tower, rapidly clearing a height over 200 stories tall to get to the villains in time. Otherwise, there was no way I'd be able to catch up by using the elevators. I could see the doctor's form in the helicopter. He seemed injured, but alive, which eased my mind a little. Alright, I'll only have one shot at this. The villain, who I assumed was the Wolfram All Might mentioned, had his eyes closed, luckily. Which meant he didn't see my rapidly approaching body from beneath the aircraft. As I came up to them, I swung my hand backwards, creating a powerful gale that changed my direction mid-air, shooting me towards the doctor. The helicopter had open sides, which I used to fly into the craft and wrap my arms around his body. At the same, I kicked my legs out in an arc, producing a wave of force that hit Wolfram and the pilot, sending them both crashing into the controls. As the professor and I shot out of the helicopter, a loud boom materialized behind me. The aircraft must have exploded. My current trajectory aimed our bodies towards the rooftop helipad, which suited my purposes just fine. Landing lightly, I observed the man in my arms with concern. The concussive wave from the blast seemed to have knocked him out, but he was still breathing. Hitachi, he mumbled incoherently before his head sagged to the side and his body slumped like a ragdoll. I gave a silent sigh of relief. At least it seemed like he was alive for now. I lay his prone form against a wall gently before turning my gaze around to the helicopter wreckage. My ears were detecting a faint heartbeat from within the debris. One of them still alive. Sure enough, from within the wreckage a pillar of metal formed from the debris shot towards me. I easily shattered it with one fist thanks to my new power. A groaning, bloody man emerged amidst the flames. I effing knew it, he swore, nothing ever goes this smoothly without some dumb hero to F it up. His clothes were ragged, but he seemed mostly uninjured. And who the F are you supposed to be? He asked. My name is Midoriya Izuku, I responded. Remember it as the one who put you down. All I got in response to that was a scoff. You may be powerful, but I've been gifted with power too. He grinned and pulled out an unidentifiable piece of metal from his jacket. It looked like a crown or tiara of some kind. Wolfram placed it around his head and immediately his skin began to turn red. His muscles bulged, ripping through his clothes as debris from the wreckage began to rise around him. They formed a metallic construct around his lower body, raising him up so that he towered high above me and so only his torso was visible. Iron pipes coiled like serpents around him, looking like some demented metallic Lovecraftian horror monster. Wolfram pointed at the professor, who was unconscious against the wall behind me, causing a few of the serpentine coils to shoot towards him. Those I disintegrated with a well-timed punch, the force of my blows enough to reduce them to fine dust. Gee, Wolfram sneered, how annoying. He told me that All Might was weaker than before, but nothing about another person with similar powers. He? Who's he? I questioned. HMPH, no one you need to worry about. If I were you, I'd worry about trying to stay alive for now. I merely grinned at him, right back at you. He roared in anger and slammed his hands into the tower beneath him, causing 4 metallic pillars and tentacles to shoot towards me at bullet speed. Each pillar was wider than my entire body. They looked to pierce me where I stood, but I shot forward with a sonic boom, dodging their strike. Wolfram sent more and more pillars at me, but most of them I dodged with ease and the rest I shattered with a swing of my arms. Surrender, I said, there's nothing you can do against me. Shut up, he growled, I'll show you my power. With an almighty groan, he thrust both his palms out, facing upwards, and began to raise them. Mirroring his motions, the entire tower glowed purple, as the tower itself seemed to rise up per his actions. The sudden shift almost caused me to lose my footing, but I was able to catch myself in time. If this continues, he'll destroy the tower, and everyone within. I thought of Melissa and All Might, as well as the rest of the civilians, still inside the tower. I can't let them die. I lowered myself into a sprinter's stance, and concentrated. Let's try out this power All Might's given me. Red lines of energy spread across my body, ripping the suit Melissa made me, and leaving my torso bare. Green tendrils of lightning shot out of the corner of my eyes like angry snakes, dissipating into thin air. I glared at Wolfram, who was still lifting up the rooftop. One for all. 100%. I disappeared from my spot and rematerialized in front of Wolfram, fist cocked back. His gray eyes saucered, and he lurched backwards in shock. Too late, though. I gave him a savage grin. Squeeze your buttocks and yell this inside your heart. All Might's words rang out clearly in my head. Smash. My fist impacted his face like a warhead, pulverizing both him and his metallic construct. Wolfram crashed through his self-made construct, shooting into the ground with enough force to create a crater. All of I-Tower shook from the force of my punch, but the foundations were, luckily, strong enough to withstand the impact. I deactivated One for All and allowed myself to land gently on the rooftop next to Wolfram's unconscious body. I inspected him cautiously. Unconscious and half dead, but still alive, I concluded. I won't be waking up anytime soon though. Green. I jumped down from the rooftop all the way to the ground level, carrying the two currently lifeless bodies with me. I had to occasionally use my feet to generate gusts of wind to break my descent, otherwise the whiplash might kill Professor Shield. I don't care much about the villain, but he was more useful alive than dead, and I had already caused the death of at least 3 others tonight. I didn't want to kill any more if I didn't have to. I had pushed the gravity of my actions aside due to the emergency, but now that everything was over, I began to feel slightly nauseous about what I did. Landing on the ground safely, I was greeted by a distraught Melissa and All Might, who had finally been set free. Izuku, you're finally here. Is my father safe? Melissa rushed over to me worriedly. I showed her his unconscious body. He needs immediate medical attention, but he's still alive. Has the island's defenses been brought back under our control yet? Yeah, that's what I went to do immediately after you left. The control room was empty, except for, she choked a bit, the body of Uncle Sam. Uncle Sam? My father's assistant. She clarified with teary eyes. I'm sorry, I consoled, I'm sure he's in a better place now. Young Midoriya, All Might clapped his large hands on my shoulders. Well done. Very well done. You have surpassed any and all expectations this evening, saving not only myself and Dave, but the population of the entire Island. We all surely would have perished if not for your intervention. For that, you have my eternal gratitude. I blushed at his praise. Thanks All Might. I just did what I felt I had to do. He nodded, then turned to Melissa, who had been watching our interaction from the side. My dear girl, go and get someone to come help your father. Midoriya and I will carry him inside while you do so. Oh, right, she patted her father's hand. I'll be right back with help for you, Papa. Just hold on. She dashed inside urgently. After this is all over, All Might whispered as he picked up David Shield's body bridal style, come find me. You and I need to talk alone. His azure eyes glowed seriously. Green. The immediate aftermath cleanup took all the way till morning. Wolfram was taken away in a quirk containment cell by the police. Professor Shield was sent off to the emergency rooms for treatment immediately, Melissa following along. She gave me an appreciative but apologetic look as she hurried away. I gave her a nod to say I understood. Family came first, after all. She still wrapped her hands around my neck and gave a tight squeeze, which I returned with much enthusiasm. Thank you for saving my father, she whispered into my ears, and for saving me. Pulling away slightly, she trailed her hands down to rest on my chest, winking, and put some clothes on before I lost control. Got it. She blew me a kiss before turning around to hurry after the paramedics who were bringing her father away. I shook my head in exasperated mirth before turning around to survey my surroundings. The island police force was crawling all over the scene, talking to victims and the like. All Might stood someplace in the distance, talking to a few people who appeared to be reporters. I could hear their conversation from here with my sensitive ears. About the attack on I-Tower. What was the motive? Who was the villain? All Might responded, a villain who called himself Wolfram. From what I could tell, he was trying to steal something from the I-Tower vault, a technology that allowed people to amplify the power of their quirks. The villain possessed a quirk that allowed him to manipulate metals. The reporter gasped, that's a powerful quirk, especially on I-Island, which is constructed mostly of metal. All Might nodded. Thankfully, both the artifact and the villain were subdued before they could leave the island. I shudder to think of the carnage that technology would bring if in the wrong hands. Yes, definitely. As always, thank you for the good work, sir. Oh no, it wasn't me. I was restrained the entire time. Someone else did all the work tonight. Eh? The reporter looked nonplussed. What do you mean, All Might? Someone else did all the work tonight? Yes, the villains knew I was here on the Island, so they came up with a plan for restraining me. They also took the entire island hostage by taking over the Tower control room to prevent me from acting. However, they didn't take into account the actions of another hero. All Might gave a proud smile to the enraptured reporters and turned in my direction. He knew I was listening in. Come here, my boy. It's time for your world debut. His bellow was loud enough to be heard across the site. I gave a rueful smile towards him and with a tiny crackle of green electricity, zoomed towards his position. To the reporters and other onlookers, I would have disappeared from their line of sight in a green flash before rematerializing beside All Might. The female reporter gave a yelp of shock, flinching backwards into the disgruntled cameraman. I looked into the camera and gave a wave. Hello, I chirped. The reporter crossed her hips in faux anger. That was mean of you to scare me like that. Her face had a slight blush as she talked to me. Her eyes trailed down to ogle my body before she caught herself and coughed into her hands. So you're the mysterious hero who saved Island tonight. She held the microphone towards me. I just saw people in need and acted. All Might gave a resonant chortle beside me, resting his heavy palm on my shoulder. He turned to the reporter. Young Midoriya here is just being modest. He first saved myself and all the others in attendance at the party tonight by taking out the 3 villains threatening us. With the help of Melissa's shield, I supplied. Then, after making sure we were alright, he took on the task of stopping Wolfram when he realized that I was stuck where I was. This is the second time he's done my job for me, now that I think about it. The second time? What do you mean? The reporter asked, turning contemplative eyes towards me. Midoriya, where have I heard that name? She mused before gasping, wait, I know you. You're that kid who captured the sludge villain all by yourself. She gushed, eyes bright with excitement, and now you've gone and saved the entirety of Island. I could only dryly laugh. It's been an exciting week for me. This is possibly the biggest hero debut since. She glanced towards All Might himself. The reporter was almost giddy with excitement. This had the feel of the beginning of a legendary hero. And she was the reporter who discovered him. Say a few words. She thrust the microphone in my face. This might be the words future generations will remember you by. I floundered a little bit. I can't just come up with an iconic phrase so suddenly. I looked towards All Might for help, but he just smiled and stayed quiet. It seems like I needed to deal with this on my own. Well, what do you want to say to the world? The reporter prompted. My mind raced furiously before settling down on one perfect phrase. Beside me, All Might smiled his megawatt smile. I am here. Green. Sometime later. I stared at the coughing, skeletal man in shock. This is a lot to take in, I stated, reeling from the gravity of what All Might had just revealed to him. His injury, his true form, the truth behind the one for all quirk, and his nemesis, all for one. Be careful with this knowledge, Izuku, All Might stated, for it brings danger to anyone who knows it. Why tell me, then? I asked. Because, I have chosen you as my successor. He raised his shirt, showing me his injury for the second time. I am no longer able to act to my full capacity, as the symbol of peace. This world needs someone to watch over it, and I have decided it to be you. But, there are countless other heroes who are more powerful than I am. Why me? How can I possibly measure up to you? All Might gave a smile. True, there are many people more powerful than you. But don't sell yourself short, Izuku. He stood up. Tonight, you showed me true heroism, and even taught me a lesson. You embodied the sentiment of plus ultra, even more than I did. If I left the burden of watching over this world to you, I know that I can rest easy. He walked over to me, pressing both his hands on my shoulders. The burden of power is heavy, but I have faith in you to surpass me. My successor. My legacy. I stared dumbfoundedly at him. Will you accept this burden? Could I really become the next symbol of peace? Could I fill in the shoes of All Might? I didn't know. I didn't have the confidence I could. But tonight I had been given a glimpse of the darkness behind my world. I had lived in a hero society my whole life, but tonight had been the closest I had been to true evil. With great power comes great responsibility, I quoted. I looked at All Might. I accept. Green. Katsuki Bakugu. The next morning. I sat at my breakfast table, eyes glued to the television screen in shock. A spoonful of cereal paused on its way to my mouth, dripping milk onto my shirt. I didn't care. I didn't care because on the screen was effing Deku next to All Might being interviewed for saving Island. What the F? Oh, is that Izuku-kun? Beside me, my mom was equally shocked. Wow, that boy has really grown up. He looks good enough to eat. I stared at my mom like she had grown another head as she giggled dreamily at the image of Deku in the screen. He was shirtless in there, his powerful frame on display for the world to see. He was tall, standing at slightly over 1.9 meters, and extremely fit. His muscles were toned and defined, but not overly bulky like a bodybuilder. I always hated the fact that he was so effing tall. Like seriously, I'm only 1.7 meters tall myself, and I had to do stretches almost religiously to get myself this tall. He didn't even have to try. Why don't you invite Izuku over more often? My mom teased me. I'd like to talk more with him. Why don't you be less of a effing cougar and shut the hell up? I shot back, extremely creeped out. Her eyes narrowed and a vein popped in her temples. What the F did you say to me, you shitty brat? Is that any way to speak to your mother? It is when she's trying to effing hook up with a Deku. Oh, that's it, I'm about to beat your dumbus. As we devolved into another inane Bakugo family argument, my eyes couldn't help but trail to the television screen now and then. Seriously, what the actual F? That bastard had a hell of a lot to answer for when he got back. With a world that's used to daily villain attacks, the shockwaves of Island quickly settled down. It became known worldwide as the Island incident, quickly brought to the headlines due to the presence of All Might. Of course, as the main hero of that night, I was suddenly placed under the spotlight as well. All my acquaintances, like neighbors and classmates, wanted to know all the juicy details, but I skirted their interrogations by saying that the incident is still under official investigation, so I'm not allowed to say anything. Technically true, because there was an active investigation going on, but I wasn't specifically disallowed to tell people what happened. I just wasn't ready to talk to people about how I was killed that night. Intellectually, I knew that there was nothing I could do, and it wasn't my fault, but every night my dreams would replay the scenes over and over again. The sensation of cartilage and bone splintering beneath my fist, the sight of Nobu choking on his blood moments before death, and the sound of bullets striking flesh. They haunted me, making me lose sleep, but I couldn't tell any of my classmates that. Or my neighbors. Not even my mother. I kept myself tight-lipped. Of course, my mother noticed something was wrong, but she didn't know how to comfort me. All she knew was that people died that night, not by whom, and I never told her precisely what happened. She tried her best to get me to open up, but I couldn't tell her. I couldn't bear to see the look in her eyes when she realized that her darling child was no longer so innocent anymore. I would do anything to spare her from that. Funnily enough, Kaken was the only one who discovered my mental issue amongst my friends. He had taken one look at me, in the midst awkwardly deflecting questions from hyper-eager classmates, and exploded. Who gives a flying shit anyway? Don't think you're hot stuff just because you saved a bunch of piss-poor civilians. Deku, I'm more than capable of doing the same shit, even better than you. So you guys better stop jerking him off before he gets an inflated ego. One of male members off to the side muttered distastefully, what's his problem anyway? He's just jealous of all the attention Midoriya-san has been getting lately. Yeah, Bakugo, don't be so obvious about your envy. It's unbecoming and honestly pathetic. The blonde ticking time bomb glared at the group and raised his palm, emitting threatening little explosions. Say that again, you fucking extras. Came the growl. The group rolled their eyes at his antics, but dispersed anyway. We'd all gotten used to Bakugo's threats over the years. He rarely acted on them, so most of the classmates just brushed off his comments. However, his intervention did take the heat off of me, for which I shot him a grateful look. Thanks, Kaken. Don't effing call me that, Deku. And I don't know what the F you're talking about. I'll stop calling you that when you stop calling me Deku. I'll stop calling you Deku when you stop buying a Deku, you effing Deku. What does that even mean? How can I stop being something if I don't know what I'm doing to be that something? If you don't even know what you're doing to be a Deku, then you're obviously just a freaking Deku. As I thought, it's impossible to reason with someone who hasn't reasoned themselves into their position. Your status as a Deku isn't something I'm arguing, dipshit. It's my premise. Yo, you don't have to reason it because it's the effing premise. You have to swear in every sentence. That must be hard. F you, Deku. Now we're just being petty. Several onlookers spectated our arguments with barely concealed amusement. Kaken and I were famous for our legendary arguments, and I had even heard rumors of a betting pool circulating amongst the student body about the final victor. Even some of the teachers were in on it, I heard. Regardless of his intention, Kaken's clumsy method of changing the subject and the subsequent banter successfully put a tiny smile on my face. He noticed that and snorted, turning to walk away. Gin up, Deku. A hero does what he needs to, nothing more. Don't get distracted by anything else. But those words, he departed, off to terrorize someone else, I reckon. I watched his departing figure, ruminating over the meaning behind his sentence. A hero does what he needs to, huh? That's right. If I hadn't killed those men, they would have killed everyone else in the room, maybe even All Might. It's unfortunate about their deaths, and if I was stronger or faster maybe it wouldn't have been necessary, but I can't let them distract me from what's important. Despite his rough demeanor, Katsuki Bakugo was wise beyond his years. If I had to make a comparison between us, even though I'm physically the stronger one between the two of us, his wisdom and battle instinct surpass mine by a large margin. It's how he has been keeping up with me all these years, despite my physical advantage over him. Through numerous spars, Kakin had polished his quirk usage to an art, using it to augment his striking power, movement speed enough to go toe-to-toe with me. That was all before I got One for All, as a quirk, though. One for All boosted my strength, speed, and toughness to well beyond inhuman levels. I have to be extremely careful using it from now on, otherwise I might accidentally kill both villains and allies when using it. I felt kind of bad for Kakin, because I honestly respected him as a rival. Now that I had All Might's quirk in me, I feel like I cheated him out of a rivalry. No, not All Might's quirk. My quirk now. It was still a little strange to think about. The power to stockpile power and the power to transfer quirks. What a bizarre combination. I'll need to experiment more with this. Green. And that's what I need help with, I said, gazing into a screen. On it was the beautiful visage of Melissa Shield. Her blonde hair tangled loosely down to her shoulders, the tips brushing playfully over her shoulders. The blue glow of the screen illuminated her delicate facial features. Displayed on her prominent bust were the words Small Might in bold white letters on her shirt, below which a miniature figure of All Might was displayed. I had the exact same shirt hidden somewhere in my closet, but I never wore it since it was embarrassing to be seen in. Doubly so, now that All Might was my master. He can never know, I silently vowed. Upon being given One for All, I had asked All Might if it was okay for me to tell Melissa our secret. He had simply responded with, "It's your quirk now, so it's up to you to do with it what you want, including deciding who you reveal its secret to. Keep in mind that whoever you tell will inevitably be drawn into the fight against All for One. If you believe that telling Melissa is for the best, then I will not stop you." After thinking over the pros and cons, I decided that Melissa could be trusted with this information. Professor Shield too. I needed allies I could trust, and the Shield family had proven themselves worthy of that trust over and over again. So the four of us sat down and had a long discussion, during which All Might revealed the origin of his quirk and the long fight against All for One. David Shield said nothing the entire time, merely listened, and at the end of everything, he gave a sigh and said, "So many things make sense now. You could have trusted me with this sooner, but I know you, Tashi, so I also understand why you would keep this in the dark." Which led to this current instance. Behind the screen, Melissa was currently deep in thought. The way I see it, we should first break down what your quirk actually does. It can do two things. Stockpile power and transfer itself to other people, she mused, jotting something down off screen. The latter you'll probably not be seeing much use of in the coming future, so we'll not worry about that for now. That means we should focus on the stockpiling aspect of your quirk. I nodded in agreement. That was what I had been thinking too. In the first place, the word stockpiling is a strange term to use. Why not use absorb? If the quirk just makes you stronger by absorbing energy, why not just say that? No, I believe there's something more behind it. I hadn't even thought of that. She's right, I thought. Stockpile is a strange term to use. Thinking back to my conversation with All Might, I tried to remember if he had used any other word to describe One for All's mechanisms. Nope, just stockpiling. The word stockpile implies storing something for later use. Which is basically what One for All does. Could it be you're reading too much into this? I questioned Melissa, who conceded with a nod. Maybe. I was just talking out loud, mostly. But let's talk about the power aspect of your quirk, she said, which is also extremely vague. What exactly is power? Does he mean energy? Like heat, light, radiation? Remember, power can mean many things. She paused here. Aizu, do you have a thermometer at home? Of course, I replied in confusion. Why? Be a dear and grab it for me, please. Sure, hold on. I took a moment to complete a request while she waited patiently on the other side of the screen. I'm back, I said, now what? Take your temperature for me. It's normal. 36 degrees Celsius. So the power your quirk absorbs isn't heat since your body temperatures are normal, she scribbles frantically off screen, and it's obviously not light either since we can still see you. It could be radiation, but it's unlikely since heat and light are forms of radiation as well. She nods, that about concludes it. I stared at her in bewilderment. Concludes what? She just went off on a tangent and left me in the dust metaphorically. Melissa looked at me proudly. Without further tests, I can say with about 80% certainty what the power one for all stockpiles is. Really? How can you tell? Once you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. She paused for dramatic effect, a tilt at the edge of her mouth, the only thing that betrayed her excitement. Quirks, she said, one for all stockpiles quirks and transforms them into energy. Green. No way, I immediately denied, that's insane. That's the same power as. All for one, she looked at me knowingly, it's almost the same power. Hold on, I said, there are holes in this theory. If one for all truly stockpiles quirks, then how is it that All Might only had his strength enhanced? Shouldn't there be more powers available? That's a good point, Melissa conceded, but it could be that All Might simply never realized the full potential of one for all. She looked at me, I myself am quirkless, but I do know that quirks are like muscles. You have to flex them in order to activate. She leaned back and crossed her arms under her bust. However, if you were unaware of this muscle, could it be that you just never flexed it because you didn't know it was there? I shook my head in disbelief. This theory is too insane, I said, if what you're saying is true, then everything we knew before is a lie. There's a simple way to test this, Melissa stated, then we'll know conclusively. How? Here's what you need actually, I want to be there for this. I'll go to you. She'll do what? You'll what? She gave me a smirk from beyond the screen. I'll go to you. The screen turned black. She hung up. I gulped at the blank screen, looking at my disgruntled reflection on the black surface. How am I going to break this to Mom? 1 week later. I'm sorry for intruding, ma'am, Melissa bowed as she stepped through the doorway. Oh, it's no trouble at all. My mother gushed at the blonde, hurrying over to lift her up. There's no need for formality, dear, just call me Mom. Mom? I hastily mouthed from behind Melissa, what are you doing? She ignored me and led Melissa inside after linking arms with the younger girl. Izuku, help the poor girl with her luggage, please. Melissa merely smiled and followed along, giving me a sly look as she headed inside. I could only sigh and pick up Melissa's trunks, following them into my house. 1 week ago, when I told my mother that an acquaintance of mine would be visiting in the following week, she was initially dubious about it. However, when I told her that it would be a girl, her demeanor changed immediately. The girl? She repeated, giving me a suggestive grin, you're inviting a girl over? Why yes. I responded nervously. She hummed. You've never had a girl over before, she must be special in some way. Do I know her? No, you probably don't know her. She's the daughter of David Shield, the famous professor. I met her on Island. My mother gasped knowingly, you sure act quickly, son. Well, I certainly want to look at this girl that my son is bringing home for the first time. For the rest of the week, she had been giddy with excitement, constantly asking for details about Melissa and I's relationship. I deflected the subject as best as I could, but a mother could sniff out her son's lies like a bloodhound, and she kept giving me knowing looks that made my face tingle in warmth. Finally, the day that Melissa arrived came, and my mom had taken one look at her and fell in love. Placing Melissa's suspiciously heavy trunks in the guest room we had prepared for her, I headed down the stairs of my house towards the living room, where the two women were currently seated on sofa couches. You're very welcome to stay, as long as you like, I heard Mom say, it's about time there was a more feminine touch in the house. I've applied for leave from my academy, for research, Melissa replied, so I can stay here for a few months. Wonderful, my mother gasped, that leaves plenty of time for us to get to know another. Don't frighten off the girl, I stated dryly, as I walked into the conversation, Melissa, you don't have to pay her any mind. Poppycock, Melissa said, how could I possibly ignore Mrs. Midoriya? I'm sure she's a lot wiser than you are. Oh, you sweet child, my mom put a hand to her cheeks, you don't know how happy I am to see another woman finally start taking control of this wild child. When have I ever been a wild child? I protested. Hush, now, she said, you know exactly what I mean. I didn't. I really didn't. But the two ladies gave each other knowing looks, like they were communicating telepathically, and I knew that nothing I could say would change their minds. I'm glad that you already have my mother on your side, I deadpanned to Melissa, in the span of 4 minutes, you have turned my closest relative against me. She raised one eyebrow and sniffed haughtily, that's my talent. Don't be jealous. I sighed, but decided to sit down across from the women, who seemed content with making small talk for now. I let them converse, sitting in silence for about 10 minutes, munching on some fruits that my mother had brought out earlier. When I judged that they had gotten to know each other enough, I cleared my throat gently, gathering the attention of the two ladies. I'm glad you guys are getting along so well, I said, but I do have some questions. The latter part of the sentence was directed towards Melissa. She nodded in understanding. How did you ever get permission to leave the island? I thought scientists and their families were confined there for safety purposes. Normally, you'd be right, but I talked to Papa about your situation and he agreed that this was something that should be looked into. He'd have come personally, but there's too much work to be done at Island, so I volunteered instead. She winked. Officially, I'm here on an academy-sanctioned research trip and no one except Papa and the principal knows where I am. I'm quite safe, I assure you. She made to speak further, but hesitated as she glanced quickly at my mother, who was gleefully watching our exchange from the side. She knows. I trust her with everything, I said, eliciting a nod from Melissa. As you know, our last conversation ended with the possibilities of your quirk. You mentioned that there was a simple way to test this, I supplied. That's right. For that, I would need the assistance of Mrs. Midoriya here. Me? My mother blinked in surprise. I'm glad to help, but I'm just a normal civilian. I don't know how much help I'll be with hero stuff. Don't worry, Melissa reassured, all we need is a strand of your hair. Wait, I stopped her right there, are you saying? Melissa glanced at me, well, it's not as simple as that, but the general gist is yes. That's exactly what I'm saying. My mother glanced between the two of us in confusion. Green. I stared at the clear liquid in the glass tube dubiously. Electrical pads and wires were hooked all over my body, connecting to a laptop that was currently in Melissa's hands. On the screen were a multitude of numbers and statistics that went over my head completely. Are you sure this will work? I asked Melissa, who was currently garbed in a white lab coat and stylish red-rimmed glasses, which I recognized as the same ones she wore at Island. We were located in my room, where she had set up a mini-lab that emerged from her trunk. Well, I used enzymes to splice the quirk metagene out of your mother's DNA and put it in that solution over there, Melissa explained. It should accurately model the way One for All was passed on to you. If you drink it and begin exhibiting minor telekinetic powers, we'll know if my theory is correct. She shifted the machine in her hands to show me the screen. These here, she clarified, are your quirk numbers, which are measured through these wires. Right now, the values are stated to be around 13,213. The numbers don't represent how powerful your quirk is, merely how active. My hypothesis is that, should One for All truly stockpile quirks as a power, this machine should read an increase in your quirk numbers. Alright, I consented unenthusiastically, I understand. Cheers, I guess. I knocked back my head and gulped down the solution. It tasted disgusting, but otherwise went down really easily. Melissa stared at her screen intently. After a tense few seconds, she yelped in excitement, it's rising. It's really rising. Are you sure? I responded, trying to contain my enthusiasm. It could just be a fluctuation of the quirk values. No, she shook her head, this is an 11% increase, which is well beyond any statistical margin of error. I would have been convinced if it was just 5%, but 11% seals the deal beyond all doubt. Izuku, she looked at me in amazement, stockpiling quirks. That is your power. That is the true secret of One for All. I slumped on my bed heavily, dazed from the implications. I stared down at my hands in shock and, to be honest, a bit of trepidation, as well. This power goes well beyond what I ever thought it to be. Try it, Melissa encouraged, try to see if you can use this new power. I want to know if eating quirks just makes you able to draw on more strength, or if it means you can use them as well. I nodded. Alright, what should I try them on? She hummed thoughtfully, your mother is able to attract small objects to her, right? How about this pencil? She held up the writing utensil in front of her. The laptop and measuring devices had long been forgotten in her excitement. Try to take this from me, she said. Raising my hand, I pointed my palm at the pencil. Come to me, I concentrated, pull. The pencil didn't move for the first few seconds, but after a while, it began to wobble in her hands as I drew on One for All. However, it wasn't the only thing to start wobbling, either. First, it was the edges of the white lab coat, but psychic power quickly covered the entirety of Melissa's body. Izuku? She gasped, wait. With a scream, her figure zipped towards my palm, as if pulled by an invisible string, flying from across the room. But I barely had time to flinch before I felt her impact my arm. I squeezed my eyes shut, fearing for the worst. My hand was still extended outwards, but my palm was resting on something soft. I gave the mysterious object in my hand a squeeze and immediately heard a hitched gasp. Oh no, I thought, this better now be what I think it is. It was. It was exactly what I thought it was. I knew this because I opened my eyes and gazed upon my doom. My palm was wrapped around one of Melissa's bust, sinking into its marshmallow-like softness. Melissa's mouth hung open in shock and disbelief, her gaze alternating between my hand and me. There was a knock-in at my door and it pushed open to reveal my mother, carrying a plate of fruits. Would you children like anything to eat? she asked, peering her head in, a gentle smile at the edge of her lips. My soul left my body, and from the looks of it, Melissa had frozen, too. Ah, pardon me, the smile never left my mother's face as she quickly retreated, closing the door gently behind her. Melissa and I were left gaping in silence at the sheer horror of what had transpired. Are you going to let go anytime soon? My response to that was another squeeze. Breen. Dinner was an awkward affair. My mother made no mention of what she saw upstairs, so it was hard for me to bring it up and explain myself. Likewise, Melissa was just staring blankly into her food. We ate in silence for a while before my mother cleared her throat and turned to Melissa. Dear, we've prepared the guest room for you already. You'll be staying here for the next few months, yes? Yes, if that's no trouble, ma'am. I would hate to impose. The blonde seemed extremely flustered, reverting to formalities between her and my mother. Oh, stop it, dear. I already said there's no need for formalities between us. Especially not after what I saw today. Melissa blushed to the roots of her hair. Seeing this, I moved to help her. It's not what you think, Mom. It's fine, Izuku. You don't have to explain anything. I didn't see anything. She winked at me. Now's not the time to be a cool mom, I mentally screamed. You're just making the misunderstanding worse. If you'll excuse me, I think I'm done with dinner. If there's nothing else, I'll be retreating to my room. Just call if you need anything. As she stood up, she gave me an encouraging smile. I'll leave the cleaning up to you, Izuku. Saying that, she left and went upstairs, presumably to her room. Melissa and I were left alone at the dining table, stewing in awkward silence. Coughing into my fist, I stood up and began clearing the table. Seeing this, Melissa shot up from her seat. Let me help, she offered, grabbing the plates and bringing them into the kitchen sink. I decided to make use of my new power and levitated the rest of the cutlery into the kitchen, where I came across Melissa donning an apron. What are you doing? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Cleaning the dishes, she responded. I couldn't possibly freeload in your house for the next few months without doing anything to repay you guys. You don't have to, I started, we're glad to host you here. I know, Melissa stated, but I want to. She gazed at me imploringly, opening up her doleful, watery eyes. I heaved a heavy sigh, knowing I couldn't resist her, and conceded. Fine, I said, rolling up my sleeves, but we're doing them together. She protested. I've got this, she started, but I cut her off with a. Together, I said firmly. No buts. She gazed at me in surprise, but eventually allowed the compromise. We stood there and washed the dishes together in silence for the next few minutes, working up a comfortable pace. I never thought I'd be doing this 2 weeks ago, Melissa suddenly said, coming to a guy's house. Washing his dishes for him. I snorted in amusement. I think she began hesitantly. We need to talk about ourselves. I tried to remain nonchalant. Yeah? I looked over. She kept her gaze on washing the dishes, but continued to speak. I can't deny that there's an undeniable spark there. I stayed silent. But, I still feel we're moving too fast. I mean, here she laughed, you're still 14, even though you don't look the part. And I'm turning 17 soon. There's quite an age gap between us. She looked at me. I don't know if our spark is just a result of hormones and lust built up, or if there's really something there. My words caught in my throat. This was turning in a direction that was not optimal. I think you're sweet, Izu, Melissa crooned gently, placing her head on my shoulders, and I want us, to work. So do I began, but she shushed me gently. However, I want it to work because there really is something there, and not just because of a spontaneous urge of hormones. There's a big gap in age between us. Here she turned her head slightly upwards to gaze at me, her body resting against mine. My heart was throbbing, and there was a sinking feeling in my stomach. So, I'm sorry, but she apologized, we can't. Not right now. Not, as we are. I'll wait for you. Can we just be friends for now? Boom. There it was. The dreaded words came out of her mouth. Can we just be friends? It felt like someone was wrapping a fist around my heart. As I choked, of course. Of course we can, Mel. I understand. The words tasted like cardboard out of my mouth. I turned my head a little so she couldn't see the wetness I was beginning to feel gathering around my eyes. Damn it, Izuku, keep it together. You're a man, for God's sake. Melissa sighed in relief, turning to wrap her hand around me, squeezing and resting her head on my chest. Thanks, Izu, she breathed, I knew you'd understand. Yeah, I managed to croak out, sure. We stayed like that for a bit, me in slight shock over the breakup. Is it even a breakup? She did say to wait, so maybe this is just maybe later. And she rested against me, listening to my heartbeat. After a long while, she pulled away and placed her hands on my shoulders, giving them a squeeze. Right now, we're too young to think about romance. There are too many things on our shoulders. I have to catch up to my papa, and you have to catch up to All Might. Your hero career hasn't even started, after all. UA initiation comes in about 9 months, right? I nodded, gathering myself together. She's right, now's not the time to indulge. There are still a lot of things I need to prepare myself for, still a long way ahead of me. I can't afford to be distracted now. As romantic partners, we'd just be distractions for each other, she continued, and I can't allow myself to stand in the way of your rise to prominence. Melissa gave me a serious look. Tell me, are you satisfied with just becoming any hero, or are you prepared to rise to the top? I gave her a determined smile. I've only been looking at the top of the mountain from the very beginning. She nodded in acknowledgement. I thought so, she said. I believe that Uncle Might wouldn't have chosen you if you didn't, either. I may not be able to be your romantic partner now, but I can definitely still support you, as a hero. Here I pledge to you, on my name of shield, as my father did to your predecessor, to support you on your journey to the best of my ability. My dream is to see you become the best hero in history, be it past, present, or future. I will mold you into a legend, and the people will continue to sing your name eons in the future. This is my promise, to you. I stared at her in shock over her impassioned declaration. A new feeling welled up in my chest, one foreign to me. This is the first person to support me. Not even All Might, my master, has said something like this. And I, Izuku Midoriya, I said, do swear on my life, to uphold justice, and claw my way to the top. I will become the greatest. To do anything less is a disservice to you. She nodded at my words, then her gaze softened, and she drew closer to me. She raised her hands to pull my face closer to hers, and she said gently, so work hard, Izu. Work hard and never stop moving forward. I will wait for the day you put the crown on your head. She pulled me in and kissed my forehead. In response, I pulled her in for a tight hug. She didn't resist. Neither of us noticed my mother standing in the background, video camera in hand, trying her best not to squeal out loud. It would have probably ruined the moment. Green. The next morning. Young Midoriya, All Might boomed, as he glared at me in muscle form, are you ready for 9 months of hell? My lips curved into a devilish smile. Hell yeah, I'm ready. Is you ready for me? Thanks for watching my video, and make sure to check out the author of this fanfic, link is in the description. See you next time, till then sayonara.